Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 5 or module 5. I hope you're all doing okay, that you've been able to take advantage of the fact that the weather has been slightly nicer, or actually, I should say, much nicer, at least than it was a few weeks ago, and that we've had a few days of decent air quality. So, this week and next week, we're focusing entirely on the history of slavery and gender. And because we're covering this history in a thematic manner, the time period we're covering is once again quite broad. We're starting in the early 1600s and we're going through the 1800s. Note that after the midterm, when we dive into 20th century American women's history, my lesson plans are mostly thematic as well, but I'll be covering smaller slices of time. So we're covering the first few centuries of the class in a more broader manner, and then we're getting more specific, right, in our coverage of women's history after the late 19th century. So in this video, I'll do what I normally do. I'll go over the requirements for the week. I'll talk about a couple of miscellaneous topics, discussion forums, and the upcoming elections, and then I'll finish up by talking a little bit more about the kindred essay, since your first draft is due this week. Okay, so the requirements for this week, they're listed in this module right after this video. But first start off by watching parts 1 and 2 of the online lecture, Gender and Slavery. Next, you should read the article by Thavolia Glimpf, Women in Slavery, the Gender of Violence. The focus of this article is about the ways in which slave-owning white women also inflicted violence on enslaved people in the plantation household. Then take quiz number 4. Participate in the discussion forum first. That's always best. And then take quiz number 4 by this Thursday at 11:59 p.m. And you only have to post 2 replies in the discussion forum this time. But I want you to, meaning you only need to reply to 2 people. But you're doing something a little different than in previous weeks. I would like you to upload a 2-minute, right? It's not very long, a 2-minute video of yourself answering just one of the 3 questions that I ask you in this week's discussion forum. So choose one question to answer in your 2-minute video. And then the other 2 questions should be answered. You should write up your answers to the other 2 questions. So I have instructions, of course, in this week's module about how to upload your video. So finally, by the start of this week, you should be pretty far along in Kindred by Octavia Butler, and you'll need to have finished the reading, of course, finish the novel, and you need to drop a rough draft or detailed outline for your essay to workshop with another student in class by this Thursday at 11:59. So you get to choose which student to exchange your rough draft or your outline with. So as a reminder, this Thursday at 10:30 a.m. until 12 p.m., so my office hours, we're holding a class chat, so a group conversation. Your participation is optional, but you get extra credit for participating. And this week we are focusing entirely on kindred, so it should be helpful for your essay. Especially drawing up your final draft of your essay, which is due next week, or finishing up your final draft. Okay, so next on to a couple of miscellaneous topics, discussion forums. So I'm chugging along in my grading, focusing now on grading the Module 3 discussion forum. It's taking me a while. I'm trying to provide a decent amount of feedback on your discussion forums. If you want more feedback, you can always talk to me in office hours or email me. But for your discussion forums, this is a reminder, but I think it's worth emphasizing that you need to thoroughly engage with the reading each week to receive full credit. So without reference to the reading, you will not receive higher than a C on your discussion forums. So what does it mean to thoroughly engage with the reading? So you want to demonstrate that you understand the main ideas in the reading, but also make sure you're not just citing the first couple of pages in the reading and then calling it a day, right? I'm looking to see that you understand the reading as a whole and that you've completed the reading. Also, as a reminder, you need to have in-text MLA citations and a works cited section in your discussion posts. You should be referencing all the required content in your citations as well as your works cited section. So I provided you with resources about how to use MLA citations, but if you're having any trouble at all, please email me or talk to me in office hours. I'm expecting you to use MLA citations correctly. The occasional mistake here and there, misplaced period or comma or something, I'm not going to dock you points for that, but I am expecting that you make progress and that you learn how to use MLA citations correctly. Remember, I wasn't going to say this, but remember that your works cited page is ordered alphabetically. You don't number your works cited section. I think most of you are not, you're not organizing your works cited section alphabetically. So definitely order that alphabetically. Remember, you have to cite my lecture as well as the required reading. So you can talk to me about MLA citations. You can also go to another great resource that I've recommended to some of you is the Purdue University's online writing lab, also known as Purdue OWL. It's a fairly comprehensive overview of how to use MLA citations. So almost everything you need to know is on that website, available on the website for free, right? How to cite a YouTube video, just Google search Purdue OWL, how to cite a YouTube video, and you'll find everything you need. Yeah, there's more I can say about that, but definitely seek my help if you're having trouble with MLA citations. This would be something that would be definitely easier to go over in an in-person class or a synchronous online class. Okay, another topic is the News, Announcements, and Recommendations Forum. I've seen some participation in that discussion forum that I've been putting at the end of every module, but I want to encourage you to participate more than you have been. So post news related to women's history, gender and sexuality, announcements, and recommendations. And one thing that you could post about is the important election that is coming up. You can try and find articles and other kinds of information related to the election that you can share with the class. You can post about, I'll open it up, you can post about any election-related topic, though I encourage you to focus on gender and sexuality through an intersectional lens. And because we're approaching this intersectionally, you can actually, right, you can think about climate change through an intersectional lens. How does climate change impact women in particular? How does it impact women of color and the broader communities of color for which they're a part? How are poor women impacted disproportionately by climate change? So thinking about it intersectionally. Of course, there's very broad-based impacts of climate change, and that's important to acknowledge, right? Nobody is going to be able to avoid climate change ultimately, but those impacts are going to be felt unevenly. So approach the topic intersectionally. You could also just think about very gender-specific topics, like, how is this presidential candidate talking about sexual violence, sexual harassment, talking about reproductive rights, that sort of thing, if they are. They might not be talking about it at all. One of the things that I think is very prevalent in our society is the avoidance of talking about issues related to women's rights and to gender equality. And that's, we could analyze the absence, right, of questions related to these topics, for instance, in presidential debates that are coming up. So you could talk about why you think the election is important. And this is a open forum, as long as you express your views in a respectful manner. You can say why you think the election is important. I do encourage you to try and find concrete evidence to support your points, so I'm not going to make that a requirement. I might challenge you in the discussion forum to find some evidence to support your points, but it's not a requirement that you do so. I'm just encouraging you to think in terms of evidence because, it's important to have evidence to back up our points in general, but this is a history class, and one of the things I really want you to be taking away from the class is how evidence is marshaled to support arguments, right? How are anecdotes used or overused to support arguments? How might you balance the use of stories, anecdotes with statistics to support your points? This sort of thing. So I'll post more about why I think the election is important as well, right? If we look at the national level, we're determining whether or not Trump gets 4 more years in office, and this is going to have widespread and very dramatic ramifications for people across the board: poor people, working class people, middle class, right? People who are already from marginalized groups, right, of marginalized social identities. But it's also not only about the national election. There are important ballot initiatives, for instance, on the California ballot. Prop 15 would increase funding for public schools. Prop 16, if passed, would help remedy racial and gender inequality in employment and education. And then if you look locally, one measure I've been paying close attention to, and I think there are other measures that I should be paying closer attention to, as we should all probably be doing, but there's Measure C, which applies only to the city of Sacramento, but if it's passed, we'll get stronger rent control measures, and as well as protections from being evicted by your landlord unjustly. So anyway, I'll post more online. There's, of course, when we talk about the elections, there's a lot to say. So the voter registration deadline is 15 days ahead of the November 3rd election, so make sure you register in time if you're not already registered to vote. Of course, if you're eligible to vote, and I realize not all of you are eligible to vote. So at least 15 days ahead of the November 3rd election, there is same-day voter registration, but you'll have to go in person, and of course that's fraught with COVID, and I would strongly encourage you to register ahead of time rather than registering on the day. You can check your registration status, whether or not you're registered to vote, which party you're registered with, at voterstatus.sos.ca.gov. And then you can register at registertovote.ca.gov, and that's GOV at the end. So again, the election, November 3rd. You're going to be mailed your ballots, though, a month ahead of the election, so early October. You should get your ballot in the mail, and you can mail it in. You can also do same-day voting as well, but again, you might want to avoid that so that you don't have to wait potentially long lines and then expose yourself to coronavirus if you can avoid it. Okay, so that's the election. The very last topic in the last few minutes is the kindred essay. So in last week's video, I think I gave you some decent, good direction on that. Remember to use the 3-part thesis statement to develop your thesis statement. Review last week's video if you need to better understand what that is. But also see the video that I created, the cartoon video that I created about 3-part thesis statements in the resources module. So just click modules, scroll all the way down to resources, and you'll see a section that says essay help found here. So I just wanted to say that I encourage you to develop a very strong assertion. So that's part 2 of the 3-part thesis statement. Try to think of an assertion that is a full sentence on its own rather than a partial sentence connected to your support clause by a comma. Right? So, and then if you do that, your support clause would be a sentence on its own, or even more than one sentence, depending on how much you have to say in your argument. So for your assertion, right, develop it in one sentence. Try to do that, one whole sentence on its own. And then choose a focus. So don't try and talk about all ways in which enslaved women experience slavery, right, in distinct ways. Your essay will be way too listy. You'll just be going from topic to topic to topic if you do that. I'm not expecting you to demonstrate comprehensive knowledge in your essay. I'm expecting you to come up with a good analytical argument. So that means you can come up with a focus. So focus on a subtopic. Think about a subtopic that interests you and that also you can find plenty of evidence in the novel to support. So those two, of course you want to do something that interests you, but just make sure you have evidence to support whatever that the argument is that you develop. So there are so many different subtopics related to the essay question, right? Women's labor, reproductive rights or reproduction, Right, having children, the right to have children, what happens to your children once they're here, child care, that sort of thing. Motherhood, so what is it like for enslaved women to be mothers to their children? You might look at family relationships through a gendered lens. Um, what is it like for enslaved women to establish like family bonds with people that they love, intimate partners, um, their children, other family members? You could think about the ways in which enslaved women's bodies are treated, sexuality and slavery. You could think in terms of the emotional and physical trauma and or emotional trauma and or physical trauma, sorry, emotional and or physical trauma of the particular forms of violence experienced by enslaved women. There are lots of different subtopics, and you could focus on any one of them as long as you know that you have enough to say about that topic. So the last thing I just wanted to say is that you are not expected to revolve your argument around a comparison either to enslaved men's experiences or white women's experiences. Right? The vast majority of your essay should focus on enslaved women's experiences. That said, a comparison, if you decide to use a comparison, might help you develop your argument, in which case I would encourage you to put you could say something in your although clause, right, about enslaved men or white slave owning mistresses as a way to lead into your argument about enslaved women, and that will ensure that your argument revolves around the experiences of enslaved women, right? So, for example, although, right, your although clause. Remember, your although clause doesn't have to start with the word although, but this is the although clause. Slave owning white women experience family relationships in this particular way. Insert your point. Next sentence, your assertion. Enslaved women experience family relationships by contrast in this particular way. Your support clause, right, is the why or the how. So this is due to X, Y, and Z reasons, or their family relationships manifest in X, Y, and Z ways. Something like that. Okay, I'm here to help you. Remember, the Beacon Tutor is here to help you. I do very much encourage you to set an appointment with me to talk in office hours about a first draft of your thesis statement or your whole essay rather than dropping in. You can drop in, but if you want to guarantee that we have enough time to talk and that you can get an appointment, I think it's always good practice to send me an email to request an appointment. I'm thinking I might set up a system for you to say which time slot you want. Let me think about that. I might be a little bit less unwieldy than email, but if I don't do that, you can just email me. So, and also take advantage of Paula's Beacon tutoring hours on Wednesday and Thursday. She will be of really immense help to you on this essay. Okay, that's it.